All right, hi everyone, thank you for coming. Welcome to Succeed in PowerShell, Succeed in PowerShe'll, Optimize-Career-ErrorAction Continue. I'm not sure who came up with that. It was a mouthful. I am pleased to welcome our all-female panel of technology powerhouses from Microsoft who are here to talk about navigating their careers and how we can all influence others in navigating theirs. To my left, we are so excited to welcome Erin Chapple, the Corporate Vice President of Azure Core. Erin, we would love to hear how you got started in tech for your career.
So, the other day I spoke at an internal event, and I was kind of a little alarmed, I would say, at the beginning of it when the gentleman introduced me as being very excited that I was there because I almost am coming up on my quarter century at Microsoft. And I was like, thank you very much for dating me. If you could see my career slide, it has no dates on it, and part of that was on purpose. But I'm embracing it now at this point in time. And so, I'm from north of the border in Canada. Woohoo, yeah. Canadians in the house. And it was interesting because when I was going through high school, I was just super interested in math and science, and ended up my way into sort of the shop class and electronics, and one thing led to another, and started my undergrad in electrical engineering. I did it just because it seemed interesting and cool and fun, and I like to build things. And realized, when I went through the field of electrical engineering is fascinating, right? I did a few internships to start with in more of the hardware and kind of low level, I would say, programming. But realized that didn't give me the opportunity to really get out and interact with people as much and solve real problems. Hardware takes a long time. To really get something into perfection. And that was when I actually found my way to Microsoft, and it was a really, in my way, compelling job description that was this role of program manager at the time. And it was like, hey, here you get to go and you get to meet customers and you get to hear what their challenges are, and you get to solve problems and build solutions that really help them do their job and make their lives better. And I was hooked. So I made my way here and started working in that program management team and really never looked back. And what I so love about technology is that it is at the foundation, right, of powering the world. If you just think about all of the ways in which you help those around you on your team, the businesses that you work, and then what the impact of that is in the world, like we really power, right? What happens across the world. And so that's what's led me here and why no day is ever the same, and why I continue to stay.
Thank you for coming. Seated next to Erin is April Edwards, Senior Cloud Advocate and DevOps Practice Lead. April, tell us about how you got started.
Mine was a fluke. I've given my career story a few times. I did not plan on going into tech. I went to a high school in Kentucky, moved from the East Coast to Kentucky because my dad moved there, and I was playing basketball, and I was on my way to a basketball scholarship, and the school had a computer art and science program. My dad said, on the intro, he's like, yeah, we got to sign you up for computer class, mandatory, like 2 years. And the principal goes, oh yeah, we've got this A+ certification class. They build computers. My dad's like, no, she doesn't do that. So my freshman year of high school, I did the basic kind of like middle of the road computer class, and I got bored. I got caught cutting class. I was a straight A student, by the way, but I was cutting class, and my teacher used to punish us by tying a CRT monitor power cord to your wrist and making you do errands across the school. So my dad got the hint that maybe I was a little bored in this like typing class, and I don't remember what we did. It was just like, yeah, whatever, I know how to type. My parents had computers at home. My dad just didn't think that was what I wanted to do because he didn't get it. My dad works in sales, so tech is not a thing for him. He struggles with technology massively. So I did my A+ course at the age of 14, got certified. So when I talk to people about being in tech for 25 years, I started when I was 14 years old officially. And when I graduated high school, I went through programming courses. I went through my A+, MCSE as well, got certified there, and I said, I'm going to go to college and get a degree. Now, in the US system, computer science wasn't appealing to me. I didn't want to do it, so I was going to train to be a trauma surgeon, and I was doing my master's degree at Tufts University, and I needed a job, and I worked in their IT department. Part of working in the IT department at Tufts is you get free education. So I'm going, right, I need to get into med school. I'm going to get my master's degree for free, and then I hit the age of early 20s, and I said, I've paid off all my debt working in tech. I'm not going to med school. So I stayed in tech, and it was probably the best decision I ever made, because now when I get into debt, it's self-inflicted versus medical school. So that is how I got into tech.
Thanks for that story. Next up, seated next to April, is Sydney Smith. We've all seen her throughout the week, but she is the program manager on the PowerShell team. And Sydney, it's your turn to tell us about your start in technology.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up around here in Sammamish, for those of you who are familiar with the area. So very much like tech was all around me. I was very aware of, Microsoft and Amazon and some of the other big companies in the area, but my parents didn't work in tech. I didn't really know anyone who worked in tech, and I had zero technical hobbies, I would say. Growing up, spent all my time playing sports and enjoying the mountains around here and just having a lot of fun. I went to undergrad at the Claremont colleges, and I was really interested in math, loved math, was planning on studying math. Econ is a big deal at that school, and I was really interested in public economics, so I was like, let's do math and econ. Sounds good. And then my sophomore year of college, I took my first CS class, and I was like, this is a lot of fun. I like actually getting to build things and see things happen, and I think kind of as Erin was talking about, you kind of get this immediate feedback, which was really enticing. Did an internship at Microsoft and was really attracted to Microsoft because they offer the PM role in their internship. And also, I really wanted to come back to Seattle. That was a big thing for me. And so getting to have this really social experience of software through the PM role at Microsoft and getting to sort of be an inventor on the small scale and be building new things. And we talk about doing things that have never been done before, and the scale we kind of got to operate at was just really enticing to me. So from there, accepted a full-time offer for Microsoft to come back, and I started at Microsoft 3.5 years ago. And the way that the sort of university recruiting process works is, I accepted my offer in August of 2017 for November of 2018, right? So it's way in advance, and so you kind of can choose a hiring group more or less, and then you show up on your first day and you could be working on literally anything. Anything at Microsoft, which is just about anything. And so got to my first day, was walked over to the PowerShell team, and I think it's just been a really amazing place to kind of grow through my kind of early stages of career, getting to be so involved in the PowerShell community and just learn so much from all of you experts. I think has just really accelerated my enjoyment and interaction in tech.
I'm going to circle quickly back to April. April, how did you get started at Microsoft?
By accident, as usual in my life. There is a theme in my life. I actually had a career conversation with someone today. She's like, what's your plan? I'm like, I don't have one. I think doors open. So I was living in the US, and for those of you that saw my keynote on Monday, I moved to the UK about 9.5 years ago. Before I moved to the UK, I was working for an MSP out of Boston. I worked for a company in Colorado. I needed a life change. I went to England, and I had always assumed when you work at Microsoft, you need to live in Redmond. That was kind of always in my brain. And I never connected the dots, and I'll be honest, my dad was, again, the not techie, was like, you should go work for another company, not them. But he didn't understand it. So when I moved to the UK, this cloud thing started taking off. I was very involved with Office at the time, Office 365 migrations. I was a consultant. I worked for a few MSPs in the UK, and I started doing this thing in the cloud called Azure. And I was like, oh, I really like this thing. And I started getting good at it, and I decided in my career that I needed to focus on Azure in the cloud. I thought that's the way forward. It's where I want to go. I love data center transformations. I'm going to go Azure all the way, and I'm going to start working on more code. I applied for a role at Microsoft. I went to the final stages and got declined for the role. because apparently I didn't fit the role. I was like, okay. So I went and got another job for a company. 4 months in, I get a call from Microsoft, and they're like, yeah, we want to hire you. And I'm like, cool. I didn't put in my resume. I didn't think the role was right for me. They also had my wrong resume. So they had the wrong name because I'd gotten married. I had changed jobs, and they're like, yeah, we don't care. Just come in. Okay. So I got fast-tracked to the final interviews. I did about 3 hours of interviews and got brought in and got hired. So I didn't even submit a resume. They had the wrong name, and they didn't have my latest job spec from the last 7 months, and here I am today.
Awesome. Thank you. Here at PowerShell Summit, we have a class called the On-Ramp class, and I believe some of them are in the audience today. Does anybody want to raise your hand if you're in the On-Ramp class? The On-Ramp program is a week-long introduction to IT and PowerShell for people who may just be getting started with their careers. Erin, what advice do you have for these folks as they get started with their careers?
So I have 2 pieces of advice. I'm going to give you one for free.
I have to pay for the other one?
The first is, well, one is the price of admission, right? So,
Okay.
So the first thing I will say is say yes to everything. I think that, in some sense, there's some parallels, right, in the conversations that you've heard from April and Sydney, in the sense of, you never know where something's going to lead, and you never know if you like something unless you try it. And so, I think there have been many times where I have looked at something and went, I don't know. But I sort of have this mantra in my approach to things, which is everything is an opportunity until it's not. The trick is figuring out when it is not the opportunity. But saying yes to everything, it opens doors, right? It creates connections, it creates relationships, it creates experiences. And in many ways, your entire career is just, I like to think of myself as an experience collector. Right? It's all about how many different things have I had some amount of experience in before, so that when I come into some new situation, I'm just like, oh, it's a little bit of that and a little bit of that, and at least I have somewhere to start, and I'm not starting with this blank slate. And so first, I think my biggest advice would be just say yes to everything. You don't have to say yes twice. If you've already done it, you don't like it, but say yes, because that builds that foundation. And then the second thing, I think you've already started to do, which is coming to events like this and starting to really meet your community. Because we talk about kind of navigating your career, and we talk about how the role of mentors in your life and the role of people who sponsor the work that you do. I think that's all great and fine. But I will say, for me, some of the most powerful people in my life are the peers that I have. They're the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, right? They're my network. They're the people when something's going bad, I pick up the phone and I go, help, right? And that community, and that's one of the things why I've always loved the PowerShell technology as a whole and the PowerShell community, is you just see that, right? You see that in the community, people willing to help, people willing to, help you learn something new, or give you, start with, putting a script out there, hey, start from this, or yeah, I've done that before. And so the more that you have these connections that you develop through networks like this, for me, walking back, it's my first sort of conference after the last 2 years, and so this has a special place, right, in terms, and I said yes, because I knew there would be many faces when I walked in that I hadn't seen in a long time, that have been part of the community for a really long time. And the fact that people will invest in that and invest in each other, I think, is just so great. So don't miss up those opportunities to really meet somebody and build those connections, because you never know, right? You never know, right, in that whole network, what's going to pull you back in some way, or what is going to create that next opportunity.
Thanks for that advice, and I completely agree with you, because I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't do the same. So my next question is from John, and I'm going to invite John to come up. And
So I'm a dad of 2 kids. My daughter's 6, my son's 3, and I really want to give back, right? So my first question is, as a dad, but also as an individual contributor to the PowerShell community, how do I give back with serving underprivileged youth, women in IT? And then my second question is, how do I foster discoverability, excitement in my kid? Because PowerShell has literally changed my life. So yeah, those are my 2 questions. I'm gonna go sit over there and listen.
The first one is, I do a lot of funding with girls who code. The reason why I've chosen them as a charity is because they're global. I sit in the UK, a lot of us sit in the US, but I would say get involved with your kids' schools and go to the areas where people don't want to go. At Microsoft, we offer funding to those areas, so like get connected in, offer your volunteer time. I get 5 volunteer days a year as a Microsoft employee. Volunteer your time, and with your kids, never tell them no. I mean, like, discipline them, but my, as someone who's been in tech and played sports like Sydney, my parents never told me I was a girl and couldn't do something. No was not a thing, and I was just treated. You want to go play football with the boys? Go play football. You get your face smashed up, but go play football, I played ice hockey, I played soccer, I played basketball, and they never told me I couldn't do anything regardless of gender or anything, and that was empowering. My mom had a phrase, never color in the lines, and she taught that to my 9-year-old stepdaughter, and my stepdaughter's very literal, smart kid, but she's like, oh, I have to color in the lines. My mom's like, Megan, don't color in the lines. You don't have to color in the lines. And I think with kids, no matter what, just don't tell them no and always encourage them to take that shot. Because like Erin said, I have walked through so many doors. I wouldn't be sitting here today in front of you all amazing folks had I not taken I stepped out of my comfort zone and said, I'm gonna go do this thing. What's the worst that can happen? Because failure isn't failure to me. I'm learning a life lesson and I'm building that experience. So pick myself up, find a new open door and keep going.
I think one of the other things I will, build on top of that is that, I have spent, I would say, my career building women's communities, and women's communities and expanding to just how do you create more inclusion and space for, anyone to bring their full selves to what they're doing. I got depressed one day because, we're trying to build more women in the industry, and we focus a lot on how we, when folks come in from college, how do we create the support path? And I was back doing, some work with my alma mater, and they do these sort of science and technology camps for grades like 3, 4, 5. When they, are in sort of elementary school. And it was really scary to see the statistics because grade 3 was 50-50, girls and boys. Grade 4 was 50-50, boys and girls. Grade 5 was 80-20, boys and girls. And so like something happens, right, at that point in time. And I often do this talk of like, you can do it on your laptop, do it on your phone, like pull up Google, pull up Bing, and type in like elementary school teacher, and like look at the image gallery. It's all women, right? And so there are these unconscious biases that we have and lack of role models that no one is doing on purpose. Like nobody's sitting there going like, we're gonna like, indoctrinate or lead people to think that they should go into a path in this career or not, but they are just infused in the society that we have. So I think the best thing you can do with your young girl is to show her role models, right, of great women who are doing things in the world, who are involved in technology, right? I think that was why it was such a great moment. It's not technology related, but a great moment to see, a woman as vice president of this country in the last year, because it starts to break those boundaries. So please go like challenge those things. And the first step of that is just being aware of it. Because and it's interesting because I love this concept of the unconscious bias that we have, because it's not just as men we have unconscious bias, it's as humans we have unconscious bias. And so like my unconscious biases towards other women are the same as the ones that you all might have. And so like you just have to get curious and really create that space. And so please like find those things, find ways that connect them. That would be one. The second thing is that, I really think that as I'm going to be very stereotypical in some sense, but as women, the thing that many women connect with as their girls and going in is helping and giving back. And so the more stories you can tell about how technology is an enabler to unlock things in the world, right? I love the fact that we're at this place now where every company is becoming a technology company because, as a doctor, you talked about wanting to go, as a doctor, you can help the patients you have. As someone working on medical technology, you can help the world. You just think about stories that exist today around the vaccine development that's happened in the last couple of years. And so again, finding ways to really sort of unlock that and take interest in what do they like, right? If they really like the idea of doctor, or they like, sports, like talk about how technology is helping athletes, talk about how technology is like changing and those are the ways I think that you get them interested. You got to meet them where they are in terms of what they're interested in, but show them that there are more doors that you can open.
The only thing that I would probably add is that, we do have an involvement with Tech Impact for the on-ramp program, and that would probably be a good opportunity for you to get involved with, bringing more people into tech. My next question is for Sydney. How did you know that technology is what you wanted to do? Like, what was your defining moment?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. What was the defining moment? I don't think that there is, one defining moment to immediately go against the question. But I think it's just like kind of like little bit by little bit. Like there's like these little opportunities sort of along the way. Kind of like what Erin was just talking about, just like saying yes to like one more thing and trying out one more thing, and really building on that. And I think for me, joining the PowerShell team and really like connecting with the open source community and seeing firsthand the impact of the things that we were doing and shipping and the decisions that we were making with the community and how like far reaching that was a huge moment for me. I was like, wow, this is really cool, and I feel like we could go really far with this. So I think it's the combination of like sort of getting that quick feedback, the like sort of social aspect of it, the fact that we're all like a PowerShell community together was a real turning point for me. Like less interested in building something, on my own, and much more interested in sort of using this network of people to build things. And then just the impact I think that we can have with PowerShell is so huge. I mean, we all know that like once you start automating things and all these things, the acceleration is just sort of exponential. And so getting to see that impact firsthand, I think was a moment for me where I was like, okay, like, maybe after college, it's like, maybe let's try this thing for a couple years and see how we're liking it, and then shift. But I think the more time I've spent in it, the more I'm like, this is really cool.
And I feel like we do really have like an involved and kind of awesome and a little bit like unusual PowerShell community, and like events like this really help to bring it all together. My next question is for Erin. What steps have you consciously taken to advance your career?
So that's an interesting question for me because, I talked about being at Microsoft for almost a quarter of a century, and in that whole time, I have only, on my own accord, changed jobs twice.
Oh, wow.
Every other change in my career was a reorganization. And it was like, hello, you're doing this. Why don't you do this? And so in many ways, you could say, well, my career was, happened to me in some sense. That's not entirely fair, I think, because, in many ways, it's like every day that you show up, if you show up in a way that expresses who you are and what you're capable of and what you want to do, then I think people around you recognize you and recognize that and sort of support. But, I think for me, it's always, I didn't have some master plan. Right when I walked through the door on the first day at Microsoft, that I wanted to be a corporate vice president at Microsoft. And in fact, my husband will remind me, remember that day you said you didn't want it, like you're done, like you don't want to do anymore? But the thing that continues to make me want to continue is two things, right? It's the people that I work with and the people that I work around. And if I can do things to create an environment that makes it easier for other people to do their job, and easier for us to accomplish our goals, then that's a good day. And so that motivates me a lot in what I do. And the second is back to what Sydney's saying, the work that we do. And so the more that I can get really just energized around the potential of the work that we're doing is the thing that motivates me. And I'm looking and I'm always seeking to say, okay, well, how can I help? How can I solve that problem for a larger number of people? And that's I think what's really led me to Azure. If you just think about Azure as a whole, we're really about powering the world's workloads, right? We're about, it's a weird thing. I work on a product that in many ways, if I'm super successful, I'm invisible because I'm just there for customers, and I'm there so that they can consume. So you can spend the time on what it is that's most important to you and your business and what you're trying to accomplish. But there's so much that goes into that, and so that's a really hard problem to me. And so for me, it's the focus on the people I'm working with, the focus on the end customer, and what I want to impact, and then the broad impact as a whole that really lead me and motivate me to just take on bigger and bigger things.
And my next question for April is kind of similar, like along those same lines of, do you own your career or does your career own you? And I think I had like two motivations for this particular question. And Erin kind of spoke to the first one, which was like, what was your career progression like? But then it's more of like, does your career own you? So
I own my career. That was part of my conscious decision of moving to England. I get like 5 weeks of vacation a year. So it's taught me to take time off. And I lived in a culture in the US where I was expected to work 70 hours a week. I hated my manager, I hated my job, but I still loved the tech. And I'm like, there is something better out there. When I started at Microsoft, I was like, I love Azure. I want to help people. And I love going into customers and saying, we have this technology in Azure, and I'm going to help you make your life better. We're going to write some code. We're going to redo your apps. It's going to be amazing. And people always said, I love your passion for the tech. And I've kind of kept that. That's how I've harnessed my career. And as I've kind of gone on in my career, I didn't actually choose to be an advocate. It fell into my lap. You talk about open doors and career progression. I was like, wow, I love helping people. Oh, I got invited onto the show. Oh my God, 50,000 people saw this. 50,000 people cared what I had to say. That was mind-blowing. And then that went off in a very exponential direction. And I've taken the open doors, I've taken the opportunities, and I let myself ride this wave that I'm in love with. I love helping people. I love it when you all come up to me and ask me questions. Like, I will field any question. And I do make sure to balance out my life. Like, I love tech and I love writing code in the evenings, but I love my time away from work. So I've set up boundaries around my work. For those of you that have the unfortunate event of following me on Twitter, you're going to see a lot of triathlon posts because I do triathlon in my spare time. Yeah, I'm probably a little crazy for that, but that's my mental release. And that actually helps me focus. Those long runs, those long rides, those long swims are crazy, but it's how I get my focus. That's how I write my talks. That's how I think of a really hard problem trying to solve. So I have absolutely controlled when I work, how I work, but I allow myself to ride that wave. And if it's too much, I say no, but I pretty much say yes to everything. And then I say, you know what, this door's closed and moving on. And I allow myself to do that. And I allow myself to take the next steps.
this next question is directed to anyone who wants to take it. One of our most popular topics that we talk about a lot here is about imposter syndrome. At one time or another, we've even heard Jeffrey Snover talk about it. How do you deal with or overcome imposter syndrome?
I can take a first stab at this one and then let y'all go for it as well. So I think...
I was just going to say that is a very non-imposter syndrome approach to answering a question about imposter syndrome.
Sure. Well, I mean, so I think first, right, on an individual level, like how do I handle imposter syndrome? I think I had imposter syndrome, when I found out I was going to be on this panel, and I was texting my friends about who the other panelists were, and I was like, ooh, not sure if I belong, but also acknowledging that, I don't have all the answers, but I do have my, lived experience that I can share on this panel. But I think in general, on an individual level, it's for me, I just try and, make sure I'm toggling into that, learning mindset, right? If it is true that I am the stupidest person in the room, what an exciting room for me to be in and, learn so much from. And so, I think approaching that with honesty and, seeing the upside of what I don't know as huge opportunities for learning. But I guess similarly, who's ever had imposter syndrome? You get a raise of hands, right? So if everybody in the room has their hands raised, probably not a me individual problem, probably a system problem, right? So how can we look at this from sort of more of a systems approach? And I think that's where I put on my open source maintainer hat or community member hat. And that's the question I think the question that keeps me up at night is how do we create psychological safety in open source and in our communities? And I think a big part of that, and something we talk about as a team, is how do we sort of handle that imposter syndrome together so that like folks feel welcome to open an issue in the repo or make the contribution before they feel like an expert, because we all know that like never really comes. And I think the thing that we talk about is sort of approaching with honesty and curiosity about what we would know and don't know and are curious about, and sort of approaching that with kindness, but like certainly don't have all the answers on how to solve like imposter syndrome all up, but like very excited if somebody does because that is something I think about a lot.
Someone once said, I think imposter syndrome spouts out the fact that the more we know, the more we realize how much we don't know on a topic. And I was always scared to write a blog or to do a thing because I'm like, they're going to find out how much I don't know about this. But what I found is when I write about a topic that solves a problem, other people have that same problem. And I'm like, oh, and that's where my love and passion for technology comes in. So I had to kind of like take that leap of faith, and I'm going to write a blog. And I remember I wrote a blog, and someone's like, I read your blog on blah, blah, blah. You did? I was at a customer site. Like, oh, yeah, it was great. It was simple, but I took that learner's mindset and said, this is how I learned it. And they absolutely were able to adapt to it. And so I think I face it every single day. I'm constantly learning new tech, and I'm willing to learn that new tech, and I'm willing to say, I haven't a clue. And fostering that behavior in that environment, I'm very fortunate to be on a team. And I will say at Microsoft, every single team I've been on at Microsoft, my managers have said, we have a learning mentality. And I talked about in the keynote, growth mindset. So fostering that within your teams, like there's always going to be someone that knows more than you in that room. Always. And there's always going to be someone that thinks they know more than you, but they don't. So that's the kind of the fun one. So I think just, getting out there and having that growth mindset and being willing to learn, because, that's what we're here for.
So I'll start by sharing just this whole thing on imposter syndrome made me think of, and there's a lot of things on the internet that are kind of cruel and evil, but one of the most cruel and evil things I saw in the last year was this billboard at a conference that said, like, imposter syndrome, maybe it is you. And I was just like, that was just really low in some sense. But it shows you, if somebody's going to go put that up in the thing, how much it actually is an issue with all of us in terms of what we face. My answer is simple. I'm really good at talking to myself. And so, like, I like to talk to myself. And so when that voice in my head starts talking to me, right, I get that mail from a very important person, and I'm like, well, I don't want to open that. Like, they're going to tell me that I'm an idiot, or like, they're going to, I don't know. Like, it's in my head. I'm making up this whole story. Like, I talk back. And, I'm good at doing that in a faster way. And so I don't think it ever goes away. I think you just get better at being able to quiet, right, that other side of your voice, and move through it. And the more reps that you do, the easier it becomes. And then the imposter syndrome, the smaller things go away, and it shows up in the bigger things. And then that's a harder conversation, but you just get better and better at it. So I'm good at talking to myself.
I didn't want to admit that out loud, that I talk to myself as well. Like, I have the little demon over here that's like, you can't do this. And this one's like, you got this. So, yeah, I talk to myself as well.
Well, I mean, you saw the look on my face when I came upstairs, and you're like, are you okay? And I'm like, So I empathize with you because I am up here with all of you. And I'm having a little bit of it myself.
We're just people. We don't bite.
I know. But it's been a lot of fun prepping for this with you, so... my last planned question is for Sydney. How do you get involved and stay connected with your professional network and your community?
Ooh, okay. So I think that there are like a whole bunch of things that come to mind, so I'll just kind of start going down the list and we'll see what sticks. But I think the first thing that comes to mind for me was like, that was a big question for me, I think, coming to a huge company like Microsoft. So many of my friends or people I knew in college were going into like the finance or consulting, or they were going to grad school, and they were going to be in this cohort, and they were going to know all these people, and they were going to be their friends for the rest of their lives. And I was like, that's awesome. At Microsoft, it's a really big company. You don't know everybody who graduated the same year as you and starts. Everybody's sort of off on their own teams. And so when I got to Microsoft, I was kind of like, where are my people? Where are all these other people that must be just like me? I know that our like incoming classes are like very diverse. I think some of like the most diverse demographics at the company are like the new hires sort of each year as we kind of build that. And so it's like, where are my other like young women in this company? Where are my other people that are having the same questions as me and struggling? Like, how do I meet them and network them? So I started like sort of asking that question to like everyone who would listen to me, and then they'd kind of be like, that's actually a good question. Why don't you go talk to this person, and then to this person, and then to this person? And eventually got connected with somebody who could actually help me solve the problem and start an early in career program for Azure so that we could start to build that kind of network. And I spent my first 2.5 years at Microsoft working really closely with building that program up to the point where they hired real staff to run it, and so it wasn't just me and my few friends and that sort of thing. So I think like asking the question and like following wherever it goes until somebody tells you, either sponsors you for it or you figure out that it's not an option. So I think that's one way I've built a network and connected, is just like admitted that I was something I was looking for and didn't know how to find. I think the other way is like things that I like to do or I'm interested in, like playing on Microsoft soccer team, and then we play other companies, and sort of like getting to know people through things that I care about. Within my team, getting to know people just by like being my goofy self and getting the feedback when people appreciate that. And then I guess like, the bigger question, right, is like coming to conferences, talking to all of you, engaging with you in our community call and in an open source, and sort of like the external community, sort of that way. So there's like the kind of different spheres that I think about when I think about like building that kind of like community or network.
Anyone else?
I just want to say one thing, which is I think it can be hard and sometimes intimidating to think about how you engage in ways like that if you are naturally more introverted. And I suspect everybody is kind of going through a little bit of the last 2 years of being in more isolation and then figuring out, do I even want to walk into a room like this? I was at one of our first events a couple weeks ago, and a colleague confided in me. He's like, I was sitting in the parking lot, and I was like, if I just went home, nobody would have missed me. It would have been okay. And yet he would have missed out on an opportunity as well. And so, I do think that knowing yourself and knowing what means are the things that draw and give you energy, and taking care of yourself so that if coming to something like this takes a lot out of you, like how do you recharge during the day and get your 15 minutes up in your hotel room where you're not talking to anybody or whatnot? Or is it easier for you to engage in some online community where you can think about what you want to do and put out a request and have a different, or is it easier to do in smaller groups? And so like maybe your goal is to come to something like this and meet 5 people that you're going to have a one-on-one conversation with when you go back to whatever your job is. So like don't think about it having to be all or nothing in some sense. I think if it's authentic to who you are, that you're going to have more impact, and it's going to have more lasting impact for you.
I do a lot of work with the MVPs, the Microsoft MVPs in the UK. How many MVPs are in the room? Good amount. The UK and EMEA, Europe, have the highest percentage of Microsoft MVPs in the world. So geographically, I'm really close to them, and when I post something on Twitter or whatever, they all promote it, and I was like, oh, okay. So I do engage with them regularly. I'm part of an Azure Cloud Native user group based out of the UK, but we kind of push it globally, and I want to give back to the community, because having been on the outside of Microsoft, I have complete empathy. I mean, you both started Microsoft like right out of school, where I was on the outside, like I worked my day job, and I had other things to do at night. Like I didn't get learning time at my job. I had to spend my evenings learning PowerShell, learning how to do all these things and learning the cloud, take my Microsoft certifications. Oh my God, I have so many certifications. Those are my evenings and weekends. So when I have been at Microsoft, I'm like, I get what it's like to be out there and be normal. I think when you're in Microsoft, you're in this bubble in a good way, but just, I have that empathy. So when I work with the MVPs, they sit there and they spend their evenings doing stuff in Azure, their side projects, and I'm like, how do you guys have this energy? But they're so supportive of each other. They're so positive, and my respect for that. So I talk to them regularly. I will put feedback out on LinkedIn or Twitter. I think a lot of you saw my post about those of you that are under the age of 25 learning PowerShell, how'd you do it? Why? Because I'm not 25, and I need to know how the kids these days learn PowerShell. because my colleague Pierre and I are creating content for them that they want to see. And as all of us here have learned PowerShell in different ways, we learned it our way, but I need to know how other people learn it, because what worked for me didn't. So I do a lot of work with the community. I'm very fortunate to sit in the geographic location and really supportive people. And I just, I support them. They support the heck out of me, and I try to go to all the events. I join MVP calls, and I think it's awesome. I think it's really cool to see that involvement.
And I think that goes back to John's question a little bit of how do we get these younger kids engaged and involved as well. At this point, TikTok. Yeah, you and I have talked about
Jason
that.
Helmick in the
He
room?
is.
Jason Helmick will be doing TikTok videos soon to involve the younger people of the community. No joke, he's going to be doing it.
We look forward to seeing your TikTok channel. At this point, I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. Yes, Pierre?
So you've talked about being owned and owning your careers, ways to encourage the younger generations to come into tech and all of that. Once they're in, and I look around, and I'm looking at ratios here, and it's not as it should be, what can we do to be better allies?
This is going to be controversial, but I like being controversial. I am involved in a culture right now that is different than the one I grew up in, and a lot of women stay at home when they have children. You brought it up. A lot of girls by the age of 12 decide to do unicorns, rainbows, not tech, not STEM, because it's what their friends do. And for us that are in tech, unfortunately, as a gender, I have to carry a child. I can't give it to my spouse, unfortunately. I've chosen to not have children, but I think I work with a lot of people in the UK where it's still part of the culture. The women stay home with the children. I have a few female friends that are high-powered execs of very large companies, and their husbands stay at home. And I think as a culture, we have a bit of a toxic thing about, I'm the man, and I will go to work, I will put food on the table, and I love that. But I'm also saying, well, I'm the woman. I'm going to put food on the table. Why don't you stay home with the kids? Be the stay-at-home dog father, or whatever. I think there's a bit of a societal thing. And as a woman, I've not had children, I can't comment. But from the mothers I know, they're very attached to their kids and very protective. But I think it takes a real man to step up and say, you know what? I'm going to raise the kids. And maybe a little bit of role reversal. So I know that's a little bit controversial, but it's okay as a man to say, my wife is stronger than me, she's the backbone, and maybe you help more with the family. Allow the women to go back to work, go back to school, and get involved. I've been at a Women in Tech conference where the woman said, my husband requires me to do the household duties. I'm not allowed to write a blog. And I didn't know what to say with her. My honest advice was, leave the bastard. I was politely, or a little bit earlier in my career, and said, you know what, do the housework, find time for you, carve out that time. And I'll say that to all of you sitting here. Find time for you every day in self-care. Go get a massage. Pierre got a manicure the other day. Do the things for you, but also allow your spouse, promote them, whether they're male, female, alien, whatever, promote your partner and allow them to do the things they want to achieve as well.
Quick thing to that before Erin goes, but I think it's also like similarly, also take the time for yourself, lead by example in that way, right? Take the parental leave. If you're the father, take advantage of those things as well, as assuming that they are available to you, because it levels the playing field a little bit when everyone's taking time off and everyone's participating in the childcare duties, everyone's participating in the household duties and those sorts of things.
So I'll say something that may be controversial, building on top of that, which is, I don't think it needs to be an either or. And so for me, what's really important is that, my husband and I are equally involved in what's doing. And so I really do think there is that place where you've got to look at it and say, what is the work of the family? And how are we going to divide that responsibility? And I know I'm in a more privileged position, but what am I going to outsource? because one of the best tips that I had from somebody at one point in time was like, my housekeeper comes like the day before garbage, and so like they put the garbage out at the end when they leave the house, and I'm like, that is brilliant. Like all these life hacks in some sense in terms of what you do. So I would say I think it needs to be a partnership in some sense. But that is sort of the family unit that deals with. But I think when you're in the workplace, first of all, I really appreciate the question, because I think the question, that's what starts it all, right? The fact that you're curious. And for me, it's two things. It's curiosity, right? When you see someone who is not like you in some way, like genuinely being empathetic and showing up and being curious about what their experience is like. And that takes courage, because I will tell you what ends up happening is you're gonna get into a messy conversation. You're gonna get into a conversation where maybe you ask a question and maybe you put your foot in your mouth. And I'm gonna tell you from the other side, I would much rather have someone with genuine interest in me put their foot in their mouth and open up a dialogue that we can then learn together than to not even ask that question. So I would say, please be courageous, ask that question, show up. Maybe it isn't the most politically correct thing for you to say, but if you do it with genuineness and you do it with empathy and you're doing it to truly understand how you might be able to help, right? I think you're gonna see that the other person will receive it in a way. And it's been, those have been some of my most closest allies today are people who ask me a really stupid question, but it opened the door for us to have a very meaningful conversation that shifted both of our perspectives, because, I learn every day as well.
And on that note, I think we are out of time. I want to say thank you, everyone, for coming and talking with us, and I really appreciate your time.